Doesn't make sense, does it?
No, let's just check in
rethink that.
Sister Susie's actually producing from the pub today. What was your gin and tonic suggestion, by the way? What was the gin you're going with?
It's called Bee Vomit.
I mean, that's not a great name for a gin.
No, but it's really good. The company is called Psychopomp, but the particular one is called Bee Vomit because it has pollen in it. They've gone with a trendy name. I can't say anymore.
Have you got jasmine in your mind, by the way? Is there any...
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it affects us all in the end.
It does. It comes to us all.
Today's confession is a Portuguese confession, and it comes from Jose. Well, let's just say it comes from Jose, shall we? And there's two things to say. First of all, he gets straight to it. There's none of that.
Really?
Father Simon, back in the day, I remember. Do you remember when I turned on the radio and there was Slade and all that kind of stuff? There's none of that.
Oh,
he
right.
g's straight to it.
Okay, good for him.
And it's sort of slightly. It's not broken English, but it's clearly, Jose's thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Jose says, Father Simon and his team of sinners, I must start my confession by telling you I am from Portugal. And I came to the UK around 18 years ago. This confession relates to the earlier 1980s, however, when I was still living in Portugal. This is the beginning of the first cremations back in Portugal. So we're back into the...
Okay.
I told you we'd got straight to it.
Yeah.
Straight to the funeral groove.
The first of the cremations.
First cremations back in Portugal. There were no specific and dedicated crematoriums. Cremations were done in specific areas of just a few cemeteries and with some rustic equipment. A big contrast to today's reality. Anyway, it's a little...
Okay.
It's a bit of a grim start.
I mean, rustic equipment. Okay.
Also at the time, it was not very common to do cremations, as people had a strong sense of tradition in Portugal, and that meant that relatives had to be buried. So apart from being, at the time, rare to do cremations, it was also, in some cases, a bit hit and miss, as equipment sometimes failed. I mean, this is making a lot of people very nervous.
Okay.
Things just went a bit awry, says Jose. If you walk now, this is where we take another left turn.
Oh, right.
If you remember, around this time, it was also very common for people to have CB radios.
Oh, yeah.
Citizen band in the car, mobile radios that everyone used with pride. Breaker 19, this is Rubber Duck. You got a copy on me, Big Ben. Come on, as we didn't say in Lisbon.
Definitely didn't.
It was, says Jose, the kind of Facebook or Twitter of the era. I had a CB radio station, and my call sign was fire. And everywhere I went, I took my portable CB radio with me. So then, I'm afraid to say I received some bad news, and that was that a dear friend of mine had passed away, and of course, I was going to go to the ceremony. I arrived early, and after some queries, I was directed to the correct area of the cemetery. There was another service going on at the moment with another family going through the service. I stayed a while to see what to expect because I hadn't seen one before. And then I realized that the service for my friend would start in a few moments. So I decided to fill the time by using my CB radio. Why not? I could see if anyone else was online.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like we didn't say. Anyway, I never went anywhere without it. So I stretched the antenna against the wall of the crematorium. You might remember it was always a very long wire when it was in place. Anyway, so when the aerial was up, I started to call on the Channel 11, and that was the general call channel. That's where you went if you just wanted to say hello to people. Of course, all the following was in Portuguese, but I'm translating it for the benefit of your listeners.
Okay.
What I said into Channel 11 went like this. Hello, anyone there? This is fire. Can anyone hear me? Anyone there? I repeated this a few times with some space between the calls to see if someone will reply to my request. Hello, anyone there? This is fire. Can anyone hear me? Come on. Then it happened. From inside the building, all hell broke loose. I started to see people running. I saw people screaming. Some looked as if they'd seen a ghost. Relatives were holding on to each other. Panic everywhere. So quickly I switched off my CB radio, put it back in the clip on my belt under my coat. I ran to the scene, tried to calm people down, as well as I tried to make out some sense of what was going on. After some time, I managed to get one explanation, and that brings me to my confession. Apparently, as the coffin was sliding into the crematorium vault, my CB radio interfered with the audio system. Family and friends of the deceased, as the coffin was going in, heard this voice saying, "Hello? Anyone there? This is fire. Can anyone hear me? Anyone there? Come on. So all the mourners were convinced that the deceased was not dead and was calling for help because there was fire. One of the relatives even said to me, it's amazing he's speaking English because of the word fire. Anyway, obviously I didn't mention the fact that I had been on my CB radio and it was me. I tried to calm people that at that moment, but they were starting to be angry with the workers at the creme because they wanted the crematorium stopped because clearly the guy he was shouting through the speakers. Anyway, I calmly went out of there and until today have never said a word about this. Of course, the offer of a smart speaker made me confess, says Josie. But I hope that no one listens to Greatest Hits in Portugal. I don't know. I'm sure they do. And that there is no one from that particular family living here. I look for forgiveness not from the family, but from the deceased for causing an uproar at his or her funeral. And also the family of my friend, because I ended up not getting to his service, what with all the fuss and bother that I had caused at the other one. And that's from Jose. So we're back in the funeral groove, but it's an unusual tale of the early stages of the crematorium movement in Portugal, marrying in an unfortunate way with the CB radio stretched across the actual hall from outside. Sister Susie speaking from the pub with Wasphorn, or whatever it's called.
Well, Jose, do you know what? I had a CB radio. I found it in my dad's garage, and I did use it, and I do like it. But there is a time and a place, and I'm not sure the crematorium was the time and the place to get your portable CG radio out and have a go. So for me, I'm afraid not forgiven on this occasion.
Brother Matthew.
I think we all tend to forget this, that, it was a big deal at the time to have a CB radio, and I'm sure if you had one, you were trying to use it at every opportunity. So, and it always feels to me like the 80s was the golden era for confessions because of CB radios. The number of great confessions we've had because of CB radios. So it is for that reason I'm gonna forgive, and also because he's asking for forgiveness from the deceased, and I would argue probably bigger fish to fry for the deceased. I would have thought. I'm going to forgive.
Okay, it's the people's verdict, please. On the text 61054, you start your message with Simon. 61054. Do you forgive Jose? Yes or no? Meantime, at 6:10 on Greatest Hits Radio Drive Time, the people's verdict on tonight's confession, which came from Jose, involved a crematorium, a CB radio, the first time those two things have appeared together, and one interfered with the other, with hilarious consequences.
Yeah.
Here's the people's verdict.
So Kenny says, totally forgiven. I'd love to go to a funeral where that happens. Steve says, Jose is forgiven. It was all so funny. I had water pouring out of my eyes from laughing so much. Absolutely forgiven, says Neil in Southwark. Laughed so much my false teeth fell out. And finally, Catherine says, forgiven. I went to the funeral of a much-loved work colleague. The small crematorium had about 4 times the amount of people inside. I came out and said, boy, it was hot in there, without realising what I'd said.
Yes, not the best thing to say, maybe. So thank you very much for those. I would like to suggest that funeral confessions always go down very well.
They're very good,
It's
yeah.
the juxtaposition of the tragedy and the
Yes.
comedy, I believe, is the
so
philosophical
true.
way to approach it.
Yeah.
So funeral confessions, creme confessions, CB radio, as you said, Matt, has provided us with some fine stories in the past. If you have a tale for us and you fancy a smart speaker, Jose's just won one, you can get the next. You send it to confessions at Greatest Hits Radio. So we're checking in there, Sister Susie producing from the pub, just checking that she's actually there. She made a very fine recommendation of a rosé with what, did you say?
Well, a little dash of soda water. It's just nice in the heat. Or I'm currently drinking soda water with a dash of grapefruit juice, which is quite a nice non-alky version.
That sounds pretty good, actually.
Not a massive fan of grapefruit, if I'm honest.
Well, jog on, loser. Grapefruit is fantastic. Grapefruit
Always
juice is the
one.
best.
Is it?
Anyway, here comes tonight's confession and the winner of the smart speaker, just because we're reading it out. Maybe in future we should say you only get the smart speaker if you're forgiven. But I think I don't think that's
Well, they all get forgiven by me anyway. So.
That's true.
Yeah.
Tonight's confession comes from Dougal. Dougal, thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. To the most venerable collective, this is a fishy tale that I have been guiltily harbouring for many, many years. Harbour.
Harbour fish, yeah, we get it.
Mm-hmm.
It affected many souls.
Oh, dear.
It all happened somewhere in the 70s when jokes like that were considered state of the art.
Yeah.
When I was a keen diver and I was touring Scotland in a caravan We were based near St Abbs on the northeast coast below the Firth Forth. The waters there are particularly spectacularly clear, and there is an abundance of fish and fauna. I decided to have a shore dive, which is a simple swim out from the beach in shallow waters using diving gear. At St Abbs there is a convenient jetty where you can walk into the sea, and the underwater scenery is one of the best around the British Isles. There had been talk in the diving circles of octopi, which, as you know, is the plural of octopus.
Oh, right.
Yes. Although I thought the tales of huge monsters had been exaggerated a bit, probably as a result of too much relaxing in the evenings with Scottish firewater. But the tales were convincing. No one wanted to get too close to one of these beasties. On the day in question, it was absolutely brilliant weather, and I kitted up and slipped into the water. It was wonderful, all on my own with only the fish as company. I swam to a small underwater mound about a quarter of a mile out and sat there watching the fish. They were interested in me, and I realised this was because they were after food. Looking around, I saw some sea urchins, which I quickly dispatched with my diver's knife and fed to the fish. The feeding resulted in me being completely surrounded by the feeding fish. It was quite a frenzy. Then I saw in the distance 2 divers returning to the jetty. They were quite a way off, and I thought that I could show them how the fish beg for food. I thought they'd be interested. So I aimed at a point where I thought I could intercept them and swam in that direction. Sadly, I had underestimated my swimming ability, and despite speeding up as much as I could, I was falling a bit short of catching the first diver. However, I did just manage to grab his ankle, which he then kicked off and swam faster than anyone I have ever seen swim before.
Well, yeah.
Never mind, I thought I could easily catch the second one, because he was a bit flabby. But this was not to be, as I was tiring a little bit at that point. I just managed to get within a hand's length of the last diver and just got hold of his foot. This had an unfortunate and alarming result. He suddenly swam incredibly hard, harder than the first, and I instinctively gripped tighter. This had an even more spectacular effect, with a flurry of arms and legs thrashing about, causing me to be flung off. He then disappeared into the distance at an extraordinary speed. I then slowly swam to the jetty, disappointed. I went to the jetty, the same one that the 2 divers had used, with the intention of explaining what had happened and why I was trying to tell them about the feeding fish. When I got there, not long after them, I found only a trail of wet marks and no divers at all. I asked my wife. She's making an appearance at the last minute.
Yes,
you know that your wife wasn't there, Dougal, until this moment.
Suddenly now, yeah.
I asked my wife if she had seen them, and she said something strange had happened, which she couldn't understand. She said these 2 divers just emerged from the sea, ran to their car, panicking, threw all their kit into the boot, then jumped in their dripping wetsuits, and they drove off at breakneck speed. And it took me another 30 seconds to realise precisely what I had done. So munificent collective, I'd like to apologise for frightening these 2 divers who thought they were under attack from the mythical octopus of St Abbs, and for the terrible tales that they are probably still telling over the years to those who would listen. And when you put those 2 things together, it kind of all makes sense. Why would they have reacted so hysterically? Well, the answer is because they thought they were under attack by the incredible octopus of St Abbs.
Oh, dear.
The well-known St Abbs beastie. Anyway, so I'm not sure that Dougal behaved quite the way you would expect an underwater diver to behave. But anyway, St Abbs sounds fantastic. What do you say, Sister Susie, from the pub with her rosé?
Well, Dougal, I did like the commitment to the fishy jokes, and I feel like they must have been a little bit silly, because wouldn't you notice the difference between a tentacle and a hand?
I don't know. What is what's the difference between a tentacle and a hand? I don't know.
However, there's a few things here. You called the second diver a bit flabby. That's not very nice.
No.
And also, you left your wife on the side of the jetty. Why didn't you take her diving? So for that reason, not forgiven.
Okay, Brother Matthew.
Flabby divers, seen them live, very good. I am at a loss here as to work out what exactly Dougal did wrong. Number one, you're absolutely right, as Susie pointed out. Surely an experienced diver knows what a hand on his ankle feels like, as opposed to a tentacle from an octopus. And also, they're running away in the car. Did they think the octopus was going to give chase?
Yes, they can.
That's what they thought.
They can.
And they thought they were in the car. Oh, better drive quick, because you know what those octopuses are like on dry land.
They can. You haven't seen the speed.
Austin Allegro. So I am going to forgive, because there is nothing to be forgiven
It's like
for.
It's like War of the Worlds.
Is this how it starts? It
is.
It is.
The octopuses, they come out where they got their suckers at the end of their tentacles, and once they've grabbed you, there's no letting go, and they do actually eat you, and you die.
None of this is true.
It's all true. Anyway, people's verdict time. People's verdict. Do you forgive Dougal? Yes or no? On the text 61054. Meantime, people's verdict on tonight's confession, which came from Dougal and the octopus and the swimming in St. Abbs. Very scary. Octopuses eating men as they stride across the barren land.
Yes.
They consume humans.
Yes, no, they don't. Well, so Phil says, forgiven. He boosted the St. Abbs tourist trade astronomically. Experienced divers would not know the difference between a hand and a tentacle because they are both cold. Brooke in Blackpool says, absolution from me, because that really grabbed my attention.
Yes.
I guess the divers were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Paul in Devon finally is one of several to say not forgiven for no other reason than the plural of octopus is octopodi or octopuses, not octopi. Octopus is a word of Greek origin, so replacing the US with the letter I is a nonsense.
Dougal, come on, we might have to forfeit the speaker for that. If you've got a confession, it's confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Staying legal seems to be increasingly difficult. But anyway, we have a whole bunch of confessions which we're working our way through, and they're very entertaining. And if you'd like to send one in, it's confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.
Yes,
that's what you do. Okay, so who's this? Oh, it's from Alicia. Good afternoon, Alicia. Father Simon, jury of all my peers. I've listened to confessions for some time now, and I've finally decided that I must confront my wrongdoings and hope that my act of confession will be met with forgiveness and absolution. It was the mid-80s, and I would have been around 10 years old. Firstly, I need to introduce you to my mother, a devout and religious lady who would regularly quote Bible verses at us in order to elicit confessions. I must try that. Or make us feel guilty about various transgressions and to justify the punishment she would dish out. Verses like, spare the rod and spoil the child, Proverbs 13:24, or honour your father and mother, Exodus 20:12, are ingrained on my brain. Secondly, she was extremely health conscious, and I grew up not knowing the taste of sugar or processed foods. I never knew what a Wimpy or a McDonald's ever tasted like.
Wow.
So, there's the scene. The crime I need to confess all comes down to one thing, and that is chocolate. Probably related to the previous paragraph. Chocolate, the food of the gods, and to this day my biggest weakness. I was never allowed chocolate unless you count organic carob powder made into healthy hot chocolate, and I most definitely do not, says Alicia. We lived in a huge Victorian terrace in Manchester, and my parents would let out the attic bedroom to various lodgers over the years. I remember the lodger we had at this particular time, Barry, nice guy, quiet, ate out a lot. It was his birthday on this particular day, and he was out again. Someone dropped round a card and a present for him, which my mum popped onto the piano and said she would give it to him when he got home. I didn't really think anything more of it. That was until sometime later I sat down at the piano to complete the 30-minute practice I was required to do every day. I just started to play my scales when I spotted the present on top. It wasn't wrapped. I instantly recognized the purple box with the Cadbury's logo.
Yes.
I'd seen other children at school enjoying this particularly fine box, and I couldn't resist. I picked up the box, sniffed it, I stroked it, I licked it.
What?
Yes, the temptation was too great. I tore off the cellophane, carefully opened the box. There were the little shapes in the plastic tray. where the chocolate sat. If I ate one, they would notice it was gone, but I couldn't help it. I had one, an orange truffle, I think.
Oh dear.
And another, the lime one in a barrel.
Oof.
I used to like that one. The thought struck me, if I ate the whole of the top tray and hid the plastic, maybe they would assume that this box only had one layer. Well, I couldn't stop. I devoured the top layer in its entirety. Toffee charm, Turkish delight, hazelnut swirl, crunchy frog, the orange...
Crunchy frog?
Orange sensation. Well, I didn't know what to do with the plastic tray, Father Simon. I couldn't risk being seen with it, so I opened the piano lid. I dropped it in there. I finished my practice, carried on my day as if nothing had happened. Sometime later, I heard the door go. The lodger was home. I could hear shouts of, "Happy birthday, lodger," because that's what we called them, because you can remember what they were all called. Just call them lodger. It's all fine. My mother and siblings were all joining in. I waited, hoping with every ounce of my being that they wouldn't suspect anything was amiss with the somewhat lighter box of chocolates with no cellophane on that he was about to be given. I felt sick. I heard my name being shouted. I knew I had to go down to face the music, but I knew I couldn't admit to what I'd done. I walked into the kitchen, cool as cucumber. My mum sat at the table with the lodger. My siblings, all looking shockingly innocent, sat in with, "Happy birthday, lodger," I said, and smiled and sat down. My mum started to explain that someone had eaten half a box of the chocolates that were a present for the lodger. He looked slightly bemused at this time, and it was time for the person responsible to own up and apologize. We were sent to bed to think, and when my mother said she'd come up, we'd all be better ready to talk. Anyway, I sat in my room deliberating what to do. How could I get out of this? I could hear my mum on the stairs. I thought, yes, this is what I can do. I immediately got on my knees and I took up a praying position, and I bowed my head and started to pray loudly. "Dear Heavenly Father, please help me. Someone has eaten some chocolates that were a present for our lovely lodger. No one will own up. Please help the person who did this thing to have the courage to own up. Please let my mum know in her heart it wasn't me, because, as you know, God, I always get blamed for everything. But this time it really wasn't me, was it, God? Please help me. Amen." I timed it perfectly, with my mum hearing every single word, and came in to find me on my knees in prayer. Well, we chatted for a while, of course. She believed me. It must have been someone else, and another thought came. I mentioned that my brother's friend had been round, and he looked disreputable. Anyway, I don't feel... He got the blame. I don't feel too bad for the lodger. I think he found the whole situation quite funny, and my mum brought this on herself in a very real way, Father Sam, but I am asking forgiveness
That's thrown away.
from the poor friend of my brother's, who had a lecture from my mum about stealing, honesty, and why he wouldn't be allowed at our house anymore to play. And for that, I am truly sorry. Well, it's a story about a disreputable lodger. Nice fade on the music there.
Yes, well done.
I thought that went very nicely. I'm not sure. Let's just check in with Sister Susie there, live in the pub. What do you say, Sister Susie?
Well, I love that one, and I am a massive chocoholic myself, so I feel their pain. If they're staring at you, there's not a lot you can do, is there? And, you know, the lodger didn't mind. He probably had loads of chocolates. So for a fellow chocoholic on this case, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, Brother Matthew.
I am struggling to see who comes out of this badly. I mean, Alicia gets to have some of the chocolates. Barry the lodger doesn't have to eat the orange truffle and the lime barrel, which no one really likes.
I love the lime barrel. Are you kidding me? The lime barrel was terrific.
So contrary. And also, the brother's friend didn't have to keep coming round to the house where you're not allowed chocolate. So I think everyone's a winner. So nothing to forgive.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Alicia, yes or no? On the text 61054. That's where it's heading. It's 10 minutes past 6. We had Alicia's confession, how she ate the chocolates which had been left for the lodger's birthday, ate the entire top layer, shoved all the rubbish into a piano, then made an extravagant prayer, and her religious mum thought, OK, well, it's definitely not her. Anyway, people's verdict is in. What do they say?
So Barry says, not forgiven. Surely there's a better hiding place than on the piano. Daniel in Chester says, forgiven. Anyone who's ever had to have carob powder as a child will definitely support you. Miriam in Hull says, forgiven. I've seen enough horror movies to know that lodgers should never be trusted, which feels harsh. And Pete in Reigate says, no to forgiveness, if only for choosing the orange cream first.
And there's one just arrived from Tom, who thinks that the lodger is definitely dodgy.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean the lodger, he didn't do anything wrong, did he?
A little bit harsh, but maybe the horror film is right.
Oh, right.
Can't trust the lodger.
Yeah,
so I'm just looking at this. I wonder if we should be thinking... your confessions, by the way, confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Chocolate confessions.
Lodger confessions.
Lodgers.
Come on.
Lodgers, there must be... I mean, I'm not sure how many we'd be able to broadcast, but anyway, lodgers, definitely. Bible. The Bible. Extravagant praying. Could that feature? Vicars and bishops have turned up in these confessions before.
They're always good ones, those.
Piano lessons.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, all right. So there's some various themes. Does that jog any thoughts for you? Maybe it does, and you could send us a confession. If we use yours, you get a smart speaker. Alicia already has one for hers. And once you've composed your confession and made sure it's legal and has no laxatives, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Anyway, look where we are. It's brought us very conveniently and splendidly to the hallowed waters of the Confessional Collective. Sister Susie is producing from the pub. Again, was it a glass of wine you went for in the end, or just a glass of water, maybe?
I've got a glass of water at the moment, but I have got a new bottle of vermouth, so I'm going to have a vermouth and soda later on.
I don't even know what that is, really. I mean, I've heard of it, but it's like creme de menthe. I've never had one of those either.
It's one of the ingredients in a Negroni.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough. Could I... Actually, that's good. Well, if I came into your pub... I know this isn't the confession. If I came into your pub and said, could I have a double creme de menthe, would I be able to get one?
No.
Oh, okay.
We've probably got a dusty bottle in the cellar that I could fish out for you if you like.
All right, well, it's just, just a thought. Anyway, today's confession comes from Nelson. Nelson, thank you so much for this tale. It's got you a smart speaker already, whether you're forgiven or not. Father Simon and the Confessions Collective, says Nelson. I always listen to your radio show. I love it, having grown up in the 60s and 70s. I think you might be confusing me with Pete Murray, actually, to be honest, but there you go. As I wasn't...
Nice start.
I was at school then. So anyway, however, I need to confess and would like forgiveness, the following. When I left school in 1968, I joined the Ministry of Defence, the MOD, as a youngster, hoping to work my way up the ladder. As you know, the MOD, the Ministry of Defence, the principal objectives, defend the UK of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, its interests, and to strengthen the international peace and stability of the world. Also, the MOD manages day-to-day running of the armed forces. In short, this was inspirational work for a 15-year-old who had no experience of working life. Therefore, I started as a messenger boy, delivering post around the huge site on my trusted carrier bike, like the one in the Hovis ad going up the hill. Therefore, obviously, given my lowly position, I didn't have a lot of contact with the top brass, the chiefs of the defence staff, the First Sea Lord, the admirals, the field marshals, and so on. They were not a part of my life.
No.
However, one day, the top man of this MOD site, the Superintendent Armament Supply Officer, known as Sasso, called my boss, who then told me to report to Sasso's office immediately. And needless to say, I was very worried, thinking I'd done something terribly wrong. I climbed the stairs to arrive at this very plush office. I knocked and a voice said, "Come!" He was...
oh, here we go.
He was sitting in his rather large leather chair with his feet on the table, not to spoil the shag pile carpet, I think, with, shall we call it a box, on his desk. Okay, well, let's
call it a box. Yeah.
He said, "Now, I have an important job for you, young fella, my lad." And he pushed this, shall we call it a box, to the side of this enormous desk. "I want you to take this," shall we call it a box? Let's call it a box. "I want you to take this box to the Admiralty Superintendent's residence in Portsmouth Dockyard. Before you say how, I was just about to say how. Before you say how, I have my chauffeur coming to pick you up right now. He's going to take you to the pier. You know the pier? Yes, I do, sir. What do they use the pier for? They use it for unloading spent ammunition, sir. Correct. Well done. There will be a police launch boat waiting for you and a car the other side that will collect you. Guard the box, as we're calling it. Off you go. Tell no one. Well, this was intriguing, as I'm a 15-year-old lad. What is in this so-called box? So I go downstairs, and there arrived a big limo. I got in and arrived at the pier, you know, the pier where they unload spent ammunition.
Of course.
A police launch boat was waiting. An officer shouted, "Hurry up, you horrible little man. We've been waiting for you."
2 accents. Amazing. This is great.
Haven't finished yet.
Really?
I board the launch and it speeds across the harbour, which is only a short distance. Anyway, going across the harbour, I see another limo waiting. I get off the launch, straight into the second limo, whilst guarding this box carefully. I arrive at a huge mansion, and a guy meets me suspiciously, and he says, "Did Sasso send you?" I said, "Yeah." "Jolly good. We've been waiting for you. Follow me." Voice number 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
I end up in an enormous room with lots of people. The box is taken from me as the guy says, "Was everything okay? You didn't... Are we calling it a box?" "Yes, we're calling it a box." "You didn't drop it or anything? Did you show it to anyone?" "I didn't show it to anyone, honestly." I guarded it very carefully. He smiles and says, "Great. Now we can proceed. Good man. The minister will be very pleased with you."
Ray Winston. Lovely.
Thank you, yeah.
Yeah.
When I returned to the office, many people who saw me said, "Go on then, tell us what was in the box." And I said, I sucked my teeth. "Classified urgent documents. You know the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia?"
Right.
Yes, they'd not, because it's 1968 and
It
it's
is.
on the news.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I tapped my nose at this point. Secret people have secret work. They have to do it, and left to be getting on with it. I tapped my nose again. "But now, Father Simon, it is time that I came clean. I did not have the stomach to tell them then, but I have the stomach to tell you now that I was used to deliver a birthday cake."
Ah, right. Okay. So-called box. Yeah.
It was a so-called cake in a so-called box, Victoria sponge,
Lovely.
hundreds of thousands. To this day, everybody I spoke to believed my lie. I spent 12 years in the MOD before leaving and going into the real world. Can I be forgiven, please? Yes, this is a true story. According to Nelson. Anyway, I thought he wrote that very nicely, and, it was... Could have been weapons, could have been ammunition, could have been secret documents.
Yeah.
It turned out it was a cake, obviously. Sister Susie from the pub, what are you saying to Nelson?
Oh, well, Nelson, how exciting for a 15-year-old. Must have felt like Mission Impossible. I don't think there was any malice. I think it was a bit of fun, and we got to hear some accents, including Ray Winston, which is one of my favourites. So for me,
Obviously.
forgiven.
Obviously.
3 accents. You can
3.
include as many different accents, requirements. I can do pretty much anything as you write your confession. But Matt, what are you saying?
Well, there's no chocolate fudging this confession, I think, or finding oneself upside down with the verdict. I'm going to forgive because you know what I mean. It's Sasso's decision to put the cake in the box, isn't it? It's not down to Nelson. I mean, he's doing what he's been told. So tie it in with the Soviets. Lovely. Definitely forgiven.
Okay, it's the people's verdict, though. That's what's going to decide this one. 61054. You start your message with Simon. Do you forgive Nelson? Yes or no? The people's verdict is on the way. Now, tonight's confession came from Nelson, who many years ago was working for the Ministry of Defence and was given a very complex errand in, shall we call it a box? And it could have been secret documents, but it turned out to be a cake. Anyway, he never told anybody, and he pretended he was on like a secret mission, as indeed anybody would if they were 15 and working for the MOD and getting in a limo, then getting on a police boat, and then getting in another limo. Anyway, the people's verdict is in. What are they saying?
Well, they're all forgiving. Dave says, forgiven. The delivery of a birthday cake is just as, if not more, important. Fiona in Manchester says he was only doing what he was told. He could have been delivering anything. But Alex in Cambridgeshire reckons something else was going on. I don't buy that Sasso was using him as an errand boy, he says. Who delivers a cake with a limo, a police launch and an intern? It's too elaborate for that. I think it was a test to find out if he could be trusted to deliver confidential stuff without peeking or giving the game away. Forgiven.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed. So we'd love your confession. If we use yours, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.